Well, good evening. If this is evening when you're watching this, or morning or afternoon, hope you all are doing well. Hope you are surviving the mess and getting all this done. I appreciate all the continued communications that we're all keeping up with each other and watching each other during this time and in this mess. And glad we can be together again and look at Revelation chapter 8. Um, it's getting busy now, as you well know. And so we will just go ahead and start. Revelation 8, when the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was a silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them. Another angel with a golden censer came in and stood at the altar. He was given a great quantity of incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar that is before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it upon the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the seven angels who had the seven trumpets made ready to blow them. The first angel blew the trumpet, and there was hail mixed with fire and mixed with blood. And they were hurled to the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and a third of the grass was burned up. And all the green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea became blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star was Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many died from the water because it was made bitter. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that one third of their light was darkened. A third of the day was kept from shining, and likewise at night. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle, or in some translations, angel, crying with a loud voice as it flew in mid-heaven, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth at the blast of the other trumpets as the three angels are about to blow." So, a happy little chapter, but it is about judgment. We have to put that into perspective. But as we start to look at chapter 8, the seventh seal, so the last seal that is on this scroll is broken, and the reading before is about to be opened. So as the last seal is broken, the proclamation that is within the scroll, whatever that may be, is about to be read. So the angels and the creatures and the elders, and now the martyrs and the multitudes of witnesses that we've been building up to in all the chapters are all now together. And the seventh seal is opened, and it says when it is, heaven is silent for half an hour. Now, I found that to be the most interesting wording, and I'm fairly sure that this is the only place, I'm fairly sure, I looked around to find out, and it looked as though, is that this is the only time we hear heaven and a time period that we understand put together. I've always assumed, and I guess most people do, that God's time is God's time, and it can be whatever it is, but probably doesn't have to be the 24-hour periods of time and days and months and years that we understand. But here it says specifically, heaven is silent for half an hour after this seal is open. Now, I'm just off the top of my head. Think about the anxiety or the anxiousness. Of course, there's no anxiousness within this crowd because they're all believers and worshiping, but maybe just the awe, whatever it is. We're let to know that the Lamb is the one who's opened this seal. Now, the silence could be anticipation. It could be, I don't think anxiousness, but awe and respect for what they are about to hear. Whatever it is, 1.5 hour. Now, think about it for how long a half hour of silence would be. Now, of course, in heaven, that might make no deal at all. But here, 30 minutes of silence, of course, most people would love that at some point in time in their life. But it's it's a calm maybe before the storm, because you have to know that what's in this scroll can't always be positive. So then John sees 7 angels standing before God, and 7 trumpets are given to them. Now here we see God mentioned, because you remember in the chapters before it was an appearance, an entity on this throne. At one time it was all colors and all. Now it's mentioned as God as opposed to a likeness on the throne. And we start to hear this really familiar language of 7 angels, 7 trumpets. Here again, we're in the Old Testament's full of these sequences of numbers that mean different things for the different situations. But it goes all the way back to that time period. So there's 7 angels, and then they have 7 trumpets. Now, if you listen to the trumpets, you can imagine, at least if we are still going back to the Old Testament, that was the way that they gathered people together. That was to assume that a king was coming or some big event was going to happen, or if they were getting ready to go into battle, go into war, these trumpets would blow, as in the Battle of Jericho. The trumpets were a big part of the processions, the showing of regal entities coming in, if a king came in or somebody important, a general after a battle. So the trumpets are very specific, as in preparing and going to war, or an announcement or gathering of some big type of deal. So now an angel comes with a golden censer. And a censer is a big golden, mostly it was golden, holder that would hold incense that would sit in a temple or a church. And I say temple or church because the Jewish people used incense, of course, Catholic people, many religions use incense in their worship. So this was something that would be near the altar in the temple or synagogue or some other church building. And the angel is given a large quantity of incense to put in to burn, along, it says, with the prayers of the saints in this golden altar that sits before the throne. Now, if we look at the Bible, incense is mentioned so many times in the Bible, and it would always be I think it's a beautiful symbolic feature when it says that the smoke that would rise, the incense going to heaven, were the prayers that were going up to God, supplication, going to God in prayer. The prayers that are ascending to heaven to God was symbolized by the smoke that would come up for the incense. So there were different kinds of incenses that would be for different purposes and different occasions and all. But 2 of them that were used that we're very familiar with were frankincense and myrrh. When you look about the gifts that were given to the family after Jesus was born, Joseph and Mary, the gold obviously was to give them money to be able to travel and do, which they were going to have to do, and to get along and to have things to eat and to live on. But also they gave them myrrh and frankincense, which were sometimes used as incense offerings in the temple, but also were used, certainly the myrrh was, as a medicinal type of entity. It was a medicine as well as it was an incense and all. But the smoke rises from the angel's hand along with the prayers to God. Now this would be very normal language for a Jewish person to hear of that day, or really any day, or really, I guess, any ceremonial worshipers that maybe weren't even Jewish. However, not so much along the next line. Now, we do not know what the prayers are that God is hearing, these prayers that are going to God at this moment. We don't know what they are, but we assume they have to do with the circumstances and possibly the judgments that are to follow, the actions that are coming. As we're talking about Revelation, if this was something that was happening, and we don't know, but in a clear, long line, all these events that are happening on earth and all these events that are happening in heaven, so to the believers and to the non-believers, if this is all sequential, all happening in the same line, then there would be a lot of prayers, because the ones on the earth that are seeing all this drama would be praying, I'm sure, to be saved by God, and because it says in the end that many people will cry out, Lord, Lord. But These are believers that are in heaven, are probably not prayers of repentance at all, but prayers for all things and for all people, and that the will and the plan of God is made manifest, is happens. Then the angel fills the censer with fire from the altar, and he throws that fire down onto the earth. Now this starts a sequence of events: lightning, thunder, rumblings, and eventually an earthquake. So again, on earth, things that all people would see. This is not a secret event. This is not a small thing happening in one little place. All the people of the earth would see this. So now here are the angels with the trumpets and prepared to blow them. And obviously the people that are gathered here understand that the blowing of the trumpets is probably not a good thing. So the seals are broken, and now with the announcements, the trumpets will start to blow and events will be set into motion. The first trumpet is sounded, and it says fire and hail starts to fall upon the earth. And when it does, 1/3 of all the trees and 1/3 of the earth and all of the green grass is destroyed. So we got to be careful about speculation. But let's look at the facts. Let's say if this was not symbolic. If it was not symbolic, if this really did happen and 1/3 of the earth was destroyed, 1/3 of the trees and all the grass, you know now devastation is coming upon the earth, because as we know, animals, people, they need the trees and they need the grass for vegetation and for the oxygen that comes into the atmosphere from those things. It would be a devastating blow. And 1/3 of the earth, according to this, is destroyed. So think about the ramifications of that on a scientific level if this is not symbolic. So like I said, I want to be clear on this so everybody understands. I'm throwing out speculative ideas because Revelation is never told to us as this is scientific fact that's going to happen here, or if it's symbolic understandings of the way that the earth will end and things will start to tie up at the end of time. But according to some of the commentary writers, this could be atomic warfare, or this could be the, if we were living under the times where, if you believe the ozone layer gets depleted and then the earth starts to fall apart, all of this could be gone. But if all the grass is gone, the animals will soon follow. So you have to understand that this is the beginning of a process that the earth is going to come to an end. And if all 1/3 of the trees in the world are gone, the damage and being able to replenish food and add oxygen, it would all be catastrophic. Because think of how many of our trees bear fruit, and if 1/3 of those is gone, then there's no way to feed everybody that's still here. Then the second angel sounded the trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And 1/3 of the sea became blood, and 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. So it doesn't say a mountain. Be very careful with that language. It says a mountain-sized or like thing, or a mountain-like mass of fire falls into the sea. And 1/3 of the creatures and the boats are gone, and the sea is now 1/3 blood. Well, if we're looking scientifically, here, let's look at both sides. If something, a meteor or something of the size of a mountain hit the oceans and it kills off 1/3 of the creatures, well, that could be where the 1/3 of the sea turning into blood would be, because there's a lot of creatures in the ocean. And if 1/3 of them are gone and destroyed by this, that could easily be understandable. But and then 1/3 of the boats, if you were in the water at the time, that's not a good thing. So if this is not symbolic, you don't have to be a professor to understand that the damage it would heap upon the earth would come very, very quickly. So now we're looking at the oceans are messed up and destroyed. If 1/3 of the oceans, and think about how much of the earth is covered with water. So if 1/3 of the oceans are blood and unusable and everything, just imagine where that would go. Then we have the third trumpet that blows, and if it's not bad enough that the oceans are messed up, this one messes up the fresh water. So it says a star or a giant body falls onto the freshwater areas, and it ends 1/3 of the fresh water. This star is named as wormwood, which is a very bitter wood that could run your water supply. And if this was manna's reality, you can imagine that if the earth wasn't doomed already, it certainly is now, because 1/3 of the freshwater area, imagine how much of that would be, well, not a lot of it compared to the world, but think about the Mississippi River. That's a lot of water that covers a lot of land and influences a lot of people. And of course, it plainly says in the Bible that the earth is going to pass away. So as you see these as what could be baby steps that are walking towards that time period where the earth is going to be, God says the heaven and earth will fall and there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. So if we see this as the closing down of this earth, this is a good way to accomplish that and get it done. So you have to wonder, though, if you're thinking and you're listening to stories about the tribulation and the times that happen to the ones that are left on the earth, you wonder if a lot of them are still existing at this point when all this is happening, and how they would be able to exist in a mess like this if that was the case. And you would hope not, but again, we have to be careful, and this is where a lot of people have trouble with Revelation. So if this is a trouble spot you have, you want to call me or text me, we can talk about it. But it's the book of Revelation is a book about judgment. It's about the ending judgment on those who do not believe in God. So you have to remember that this is a time where judgment will come to those who have not listened or who have denied or have turned away God. And so you can imagine the times for them will be bad. That's why Jesus spent so much time saying, please don't be separated from the love of God. Don't do that. Don't be separated. Come to the love of God. His yoke is easy. The burden is light. Come to God. It's just so simple. But a lot of people won't. We know that that's a fact. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people won't. So this book, as hard as it sounds, it's part of a judgment. So we'll get back to that in a minute. So if this is incremental destruction of the earth, all this makes sense. The wormwood would make the drinking water, the fresh water, unusable. And if 1/3 of it's gone, there's trouble, a lot of trouble. So the fourth angel blows and the skies are affected. 1/3 of the sun goes dark, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars. Now this language is hard to understand, but basically it means the sun would not shine for 1/3 of the day. Doesn't mean 1/3 of the sun is gone. It means the sun's still there, but for however much long, if you consider the sun being from 6 a.m. in the morning to 8 at night is usually when we see the sun, we'll cut that into 1/3, and 1/3 of that, you're in total darkness. 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon, 1/3 of the stars. So the moon would not shine at night for 3 hours. So basically it's telling you however many hours you could calculate that out to be per this Bible time, you'd be in complete darkness for a lot of hours during the daytime and during the nighttime. So daytime, let's say 6 to 8, you look at those hours, and maybe 4 hours a day, it's black, dark. No sun, zero. So the same thing happens at night. So if we were taking this literally, then panic would ensue. There's no way that the earth could live in total darkness that many hours a day and a night without it being a lot of trouble. And if you look at it, panic would ensue. The ecological foundations of the earth would be shattered as if they weren't already by the other things they've said have occurred. And life as we know it would not last much longer. It would barely last here. Again, this is where we have a hard time understanding this book. And this is why, if we're honest, not very many preachers want to preach it and not a lot of teachers want to teach it. So the language is either symbolic, and it means that the end times will be really hard as this earth will be taken down and the believers are gone and the end comes. But on the other hand, if it's not symbolic, it means the same thing. Great turbulence will come to the end of the earth as turbulent maybe as if it began. If you can imagine when Jesus created this earth back in the Genesis story, You hear a lot of people say a Big Bang theory. Well, it would have been a Big Bang creating everything that we see around us, every mountain, every valley, every canyon, every ocean. And the end of it all, to shut it all down, would be as hard as it would be to create it. Sorry, Starbucks. But here's a strange outside point to think about with this. There's a quick sentence here that we just heard that if you're listening, you really have to think about. It says the sun will be cut by a third and the moon will be cut by a third, but also the stars. Now, the stars, if you're thinking a third of the stars that we see are affected and gone, now you're affecting every galaxy in this universe that we live in. So if we think that we're here on this earth alone, if you're one of the people that believe we're on earth by yourself, well, the rest of the earth, the rest of the universe is being affected here. If 1/3 of the stars in the sky are affected and gone and dark, this is affecting the entire universe. So on a grander scale than something we could think about just as being the end of the earth here. But there's an answer here in the next verse which tells us that the times that we're looking at and that we're assuming this is the case are not going to be good at all. Anything but fun. And the next line is, then I looked and I heard an angel, or the eagle, depending on your translation, flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, not just one, woe, two, woe, three, to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the other three angels that you're getting ready to hear. They're about to sound. So this is a clear warning. Not getting better. The story from here won't be upbeat with the other three trumpeters. The next blows are going to be negative in a big-time way. Now again, when we're listening to these verses and contemplating them as best as we can as human beings, we can imagine that the believers are in that crowd and the multitude that was in heaven worshiping, singing songs to God. And maybe the inhabitants that are still left on the earth are not believers. Now, again, that's Morgan's words, and just thinking about what these verses can mean. So if you're a Bible scholar, please don't call me, because no one knows, and I'm not saying I know. I'm just saying that it would make sense that the believers would already be in this place with God, and the inhabitants that were left affected by all this would not be. So in this chapter, we see judgments coming, and they'll be harsh, but they won't affect everyone. Some of them are already gone, but they will shake up everything that people know. No rhythm of life will continue on the earth as people have known it. Food and water will be scarce, if eventually there's any food and water at all. A lot of the day would be in total darkness. Nothing that anybody would ever know would be the same. So, it's not good. And the next three seals, which is the next chapter, are not going to be good either. Nothing will be the same. So as we end this chapter, as we end chapter 8, I want to say a word about this, because I think it's really important as together we walk through this book together. I know sometimes these verses upset people. That's why they don't like to read them. That's why they don't like to think about them. That's why people don't really preach on them often. That's why people don't teach on them, because they're upsetting to hear, and sometimes they may seem cruel and mean, as there is horrific stuff going on in these verses. And there are many people out there that only like to see God as kind of the Santa Claus. God is only a God of mercy. But we're told through the Bible, from the very beginning verses to the very end, that non-belief does not come with a good outcome. That God has given humanity every opportunity to believe in every sign, and many just won't believe and won't deal with God. So separation from God as the creator of all things cannot be a good thing. If you are separated from God, who is the creator of everything we see and everything we don't see, that cannot be good. It's bad on all reasons. That's why God tried so hard to reach to us. Like it'll say in Revelation 21, I'm knocking on the door. If you'll just answer, we'll be together and eat together. He sent Jesus He sent the Holy Spirit. He sent this word. He sent everything we have to us to try to get a relationship and try to understand and get these points across to us. Now, excuse me, not to compare, but it's a great comparison if you think about it. God is supposed to be seen at times in the Bible as a parent. So, as your parents who raised you and took care of you from the day you were born, gave you birth, in other words, helped give you life and raised you up and always cared for you, if you walked up at some time in your life and basically just spit in their face and said, I don't want anything else to do with you anymore, they would be heartbroken. There's no doubt. They would be hurt. There would be pain for them. It would be horrible. But here's the thing. If you kept doing that over and over and over, eventually they would have to just say, see ya. Sorry. We did what we could. You got to go. They would have to let you go at some point in time if you continually disregarded them in every single way that you can. And this place that they're talking about here, the world at this moment, is probably at that point. But please don't see God as bad per judgment, because it has to come. Because he has extended every opening to everybody on this earth. And God has tried. And God has given us all this stuff, this creation and everything that we have. But we have to remember also, God is the same yesterday and today and forever. So per any circumstances in the world, if you turn away from the truth, consequences will come. And, we never like to think about those. But the best way for us to combat those things is to go out and tell everyone that we can about the love of Christ, which is why I talk about evangelism all the time. And to get Christ to everyone that we can so that all believe. To basically be what I love to talk about is evangelistic. And here's why I say this. This is probably a really old-fashioned idea, but it's really true. When we're evangelizing people, when we're talking to people about, hey, come to our church. We're doing mission and outreach and doing everything that Christ has asked us to do. Come to our church. Well, a lot of people stop and think of that as only a way to get people to come to our church. In other words, to build up the numbers of our church and to have as many people as we can have. Now, that's true on this basis. And I've said this, but now I'm getting to explain it a little more. I want as many people as can to come to this church until, like I say, we have a seating problem and not a problem of lack of attendance. But the reason is not so we can go up and say, hey, our church is full. We can't put another car on this parking lot. Look how many members we have. That's never the case. In fact, that goes against what God talks about. We're not to brag. There's never anything that we brag about that we do on our own, but that God does. And so the reason we evangelize is to get more people in this building. So in this building, we can talk about God, teach about God, make plans for outreach and mission, and then go out and do them. And again, we are the church, gathered and scattered. We're brought here, and it says, don't resist or forsake the gathering of the brothers and sisters at the church. It's very important. And I say this because if you've gotten used to sitting at home in a robe with a cup of coffee and watching church, don't get used to it. Don't decide one day, oh, I can just sit here and watch the church service at home in my robe. The Bible clearly says, don't forsake the gathering of the brothers and sisters. Be in church. And, I'm not saying that like your mom. Be in church. I'm saying it as a friend. Don't forsake the assembly. Be here with your brothers and sisters, because we are always stronger together than we are separated. And we can do more mission and outreach in the world together. Every hand that comes into mission and outreach is another level of outreach and mission we can do, and we can do it better. So we have to be careful in these verses, because Revelation can do two things to you. It can make you aware that this earth will end. This earth is temporary and will end at some point, and then we'll have a different life to live. But to me, I think that's a hopeful thing. I think it just is. God gave us this earth for our time here to use it as we can. Again, I'm so glad that we have a mentality that we try now to take as much care of this earth. Not that it's going to be here forever, but take as much care as we can for the ones that come behind us. I'm actually, uh, I'm a person that believes we care for the earth, but not because we worship the earth or we think it's here forever. It's not. We take care of the earth because we have kids and grandkids and people that are coming behind us that need a place to stay that it was as it was when we were here and before. So that's chapter 8, and I'm sure chapter 9 is going to be a lot of fun. So, but I hope, here again, open line of communication. Most of you have my cell phone number. If you don't, you can find me on Facebook very easily. You can find me through the church. If you're watching this and you're not one of the members of Collierville Christian Church, we would love you to be. But if you're not, you can easily go to the church website and find the church email from me, and I can get back to you. And I clearly communicate with everybody. That's why last week when I didn't get my class up on Wednesday because I was out for a funeral, I heard about it until I got the class up, which was on Friday. Today we'll be here on Wednesday, and I'm back to a normal basis. So the lines of communication are open. You can contact me at any time, and I will answer you, and we'll talk about anything you'd like to talk about, unless you want to argue Scripture, which I don't do. And also, keep the line of communication open with your fellow church members, no matter what church you go to. If it's here at Collierville Christian Church or if it's somewhere else, check on your church members, because this long-term 5-month separation is not the way we're set up to be. So I'm praying for you all. God bless you all, and I hope to see you in a week, and we will continue in the study of Revelation. Then it will be chapter 9. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.